The LSU Tigers and Alabama Crimson Tide set to do battle at Death Valley this weekend. Helping us break it all down, he's essentially my co-host at this point. Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports does a fantastic job of talking all things LSU and talks the SEC and the national college football landscape on Ruffino and Joe show with his co-host Joe DeLeon. Does a fantastic job, and again, somebody I'm grateful to call a friend. Blake, what's going on, man? It's LSU Bama week, and like I told you off the record, there's only one guy I could think of that I'd want to break down this matchup. When you think about the intensity, what's on the line, it's a playoff eliminator. But even if it wasn't, Blake, it's LSU, it's Bama at Tiger Stadium at night. Need I say more?
No, you should, because, Chris, here's the truth. The flagship game of the SEC over the last 20 years has been what?
It's been this game.
It's been this game. Well, here's going to be the truth. At the end of this game, it's going to have more views than any SEC game this year. It's going to have more eyeballs on it because, yeah, they'll say, well, it's a playoff eliminator. Well, Chris, I mean, look, I've been in this business for 5 years now. There's no content that I produce during an entire year unless you win a national title, which, you know, I guess some teams in the SEC don't realize we win a lot of those, but that's neither here nor there. But this game is like, this is my Super Bowl in a lot of ways from a business standpoint. Now, Bama fans will take that and say, oh, you see, LSU is, you know, Bama is LSU Super Bowl. No, no, no. I just know it comes with the intensity of the rivalry. It comes with the intensity of the game. Now, I think it's even bigger, Chris, in this instance. I think LSU fans have always had in their minds, what does LSU versus Alabama look like from a win-loss perspective without, I call him the little man, but without Saban being there. So I think that there is a lot of intensity. Now, I told you this off record a couple weeks ago, and now coming into Wednesday when we're recording this, I'm going to start pushing it even more. No LSU-Alabama game has been sold out as quickly as this one has. And Chris, I tell you this every week. We talked about it last week on my show. We talked about it the week before when I was on here when we previewed A&M. From an emotional standpoint, I have a very good pulse on this place. Get ready. You know, I had somebody text me this morning saying, Blake, there's campers already out. I mean, like it's, again, you've experienced it. You experienced it about a month ago. The intensity now that you don't have a hurricane that's likely going to hit, the intensity is starting to build. The election's over. It's starting to build. So all of those things coming in, if Alabama and Kalen DeBoer can come in this place at night and win, it's going to be a big deal for them. But from an outright rivalry standpoint, Chris, no game in the SEC has been able to produce the number of draft picks that LSU and Alabama have had. Maybe Georgia, you know, maybe sometimes in the intense Florida, but the last 2 decades, Chris, me and you would have been in our teens when this one, like when it really started to take off. The team that won this game normally either number one, won the SEC outright, or number 2, won a national title. Let's think about the times that LSU beat them. Well, they won a national title. They got to a national title and lost to Alabama. And then Joe Burrow came in, and then it was like, hey, we know that you're a good team, but if you beat Alabama, where are you at? Now, the Brian Kelly one, I think, Chris, showed that offensively what Brian Kelly can do in the SEC. And Brian Kelly does not get enough credit for that year 1 win under or over Nick Saban. So there are a lot of things going into this game, Chris. There are 50 different storylines if you want to look at it. The number one thing, what does Bama look like in this rivalry with LSU post Nick Saban? Because of the connection there, because of the history there, and because of everything that boils down to this one game from an LSU fan base, hey, the coach that you took from us isn't there anymore. Let's get after it.
Blake, I want to go there because you've mentioned this on your show a few times. We've talked about this. How is this game, the meaning of this game, the intensity of this game changed for you specifically with no more Nick Saban on the sideline? Obviously, it's still a big game, but you just mentioned it. A large dynamic of this rivalry is now gone. So, you know, where does it sit for you, and how does the intensity compare to years past?
Well, for me, because I'm in the business, it doesn't necessarily change. As a fan, okay, look, I mean, Chris, we don't start podcasts or shows or cover teams if we're just not in the business and we don't love the team, right? Like, I mean, everybody wants to call you a homer. You're damn right I'm a homer. It's why I started covering LSU to start off with. But as now doing it nationally, it doesn't change from that perspective. But as a fan, it changes a little bit because, again, it puts LSU in a prism of this. Okay, you couldn't beat Nick, and that was your excuse for so many years, right? If you lose this game now, what's your excuse? You don't have one. So I think from an LSU perspective, LSU needs this one as a perspective, as an overall perspective thing, because you're in year 3. Kalen DeBoer can afford to lose this game. Let's just be real. Okay, nothing's going to necessarily change in reference to that happening. But, Chris, there's a lot riding on this game in reference to when Nick was there. It was like, hey, man, this could be us. This dynasty could be us. And I think that it's like, Chris, I equated to this. And it's, it's funny because I hate to quantify it like this, but it's true. It's like when you break up with a girl and she goes and gets married to somebody else and they have a couple of kids and their kids are successful and they're successful as a couple in a marriage. And you're like, dog, that could have been me. She gets finer every day. That could have been me, but it's not me. Okay. And even though you've had some successful marriages, you've had some success with Les and Ed and even Brian Kelly. Where are you at right now? And I think that no LSU fan wants to tell you that, but that's the truth of how they feel. I think for me as a fan, though, to get to your ultimate question, it is a difference, right? Like, I mean, there is no, if you would have told me, like, I'll give you an example. When Ed Orgeron almost beat Bama in, I think it was 21 or 22. No, it was 22 when he got fired. He had already been fired. LSU holds Alabama to 6 rushing yards, and they're down 20-14. They're in the red zone. They're about to score a touchdown, and if they score it there, Chris, they win. And I'm like, bro, this season would be give it to me. If this is what we had to go to and we beat Bama here, by the way, play for a national title that year, just going to throw that out there. Or no, it was 21, excuse me. That being, I would have been like, as a fan, give it to me. But because I think that was because of Saban being there, right? That was because of the rivalry. It's not – LSU is different than every other program in the country with their view about Alabama because of Saban. Nobody else can – everybody hates Bama because Bama just beats them. The difference is because you had one guy that revolutionized an institution in LSU, and then now he's at somewhere else. And I think that part of it is what it is. But now you're staring the prism in he's still going to be there, by the way. Game day is going to be there. He's going to be on the sidelines. His foundationally, he's still Bama. People don't understand that. Like, wait, his entire offensive line, Kalen DeBoer's entire offensive line besides one guy, the defensive line besides one guy, 3 safeties, 1 corner. By the way, you could say both corners because he got the kid from USC to come in there and commit before Kalen DeBoer even got there. Chris, the foundation of Saban is still there, but you're taking him out of the in-game prep, the in-game adjustments. That is where all this stands. So for me, yes, it's a little bit. As a business and rivalry, no, not really.
Blake, the last time we saw LSU, and of course both these teams coming off a bye week, but the last time we saw the Tigers, they lost in College Station. Really disappointing game. Again, you're as close to that program as anybody. What's the thing over the bye week or things that Brian Kelly and LSU most wanted to shore up or have attempted to shore up from that A&M game coming into this one?
Well, number one is got to be a quarterback running the football. And that even goes to Blake Baker a couple of years ago, or last year, really, when he couldn't stop Jaden Daniels. Now, that's a bit difficult because nobody stopped Jaden Daniels. I mean, let's just be real. But you faced a couple of running quarterbacks before, or quarterbacks that can be mobile, and you haven't had success. Most of that, Chris, has been fundamentally scheme problems. It hasn't been necessarily that this guy's getting absolutely destroyed. It's been guys going in wrong gaps. Now, I think what they got to shore up here about the quarterback run game is pretty simple to me. You've had, if you're a defensive player, and a lot of guys that were, on that defense last year are still here, Chris. I mean, like nothing legitimately changed. You've now had, most of you have had 3 different defensive coordinators, not all under Brian Kelly, but 3 different ones. You've had 3 different position coaches. You've had 2 different head coaches. The only barometer here is you. And people get mad when you call out players, but the truth is when you're missing easy fundamental assignments, that's on you. Chris, kids in high school go through zone read all the time. Oh, we didn't prepare for Marcel Reed. Well, Chris, you know what I also don't prepare for? 103-mile-an-hour fastball from Paul Skeens. You can't prepare for that. It just, you got to be ready and focus and know what you need to do. But the bottom line remains, okay, can you fundamentally be assignment correct? Chris, I tell you this all the time. Me and you talk probably pretty much every day, and we talk off the record about fundamentals in sports. Chris, the game doesn't change. The simplicity of the game doesn't change. So, number one, in the bye week, Milroe's going to run. How do you stop him? And then added on to that, I think that you would have had to have known that because of what Milroe did last year, regardless if LSU wouldn't have let Marcel Reed do that you got to focus in on Milroe running the football. By the way, Chris, he's already tied the rushing touchdown total that he had last year. So, I mean, like, I'm looking at Milroe. He's not getting Heisman love necessarily. Okay, you think he's been bad. All right, well, the truth is, in the red zone, when he runs the football, that he's been beating you up. Ask South Carolina about those rushing touchdowns there at the end. So that's one thing. I think number two, Chris, I'm going to call it what it is. I think LSU can run the football. Everybody in the country says that they can't run the football. You know what? As a former old lineman, bullshit. That's complete bullshit. At some point, you got to line up and punch somebody in the mouth. And I'm about sick and tired of people saying that can't happen. Running backs, hit the hole. If you got to get 4 yards, get 4 yards. Where's the toughness in some of that? Now, there are some offensive line issues you can't ignore. There's some scheme issues. You can't put a true freshman tight end on Nick Scorton. I mean, he's going to eat his lunch. He's literally salivating that he's got a freshman tight end in front of him. But at some point, you're 130th in the country in EPA per run call, but you're 29th when you actually call run plays. So what does that mean? Wait, you're the 29th team in the country when you call running plays. I've seen you run the ball against UCLA. Blake, UCLA sucks. No, defensively they don't, because if you have a brain, you know that they're 11th in the country in run defense. They've been stopping everybody. Ask Oregon. Knock, knock, knock. What's up, Ducks? Can't run the football. So I look at that, Chris, and say, BS. You got to line up and punch somebody in the mouth. There's one thing that I want LSU to get back to. You can make fun of Ed. You can make fun of Les. One sounded like he was, smoking every day. The other one ate grass. And no, I'm not talking about marijuana. But what I'm talking about is LSU had a toughness. When you got off that bus, they knew that you were going to get punched in the mouth. You got to line up and punch somebody in the mouth. And here's the thing. I think they're going to do it this week. I think that they're going to come out and run the football. Now, the thing about that is Alabama, I got kind of worked up there, but now getting back to a little bit, I just get fired up about it. Like, you don't tell me that Chris, we have it in the studio right here. I have a projector screen, and I watch an all 22 copy, and I'm like, there's a wide open hole. The Grand Canyon is grinning about that wide open hole that you're missing right there. But I look at Alabama. I was doing this last night during the whole craziness. I look at Alabama in their interior. They're 62nd in the run game defensively. They're 102nd in the country when teams run in between the tackles. So I look at that and say, okay, so you've been pretty good at edge with Overton and those guys. How can you establish a run game? And I'm not asking for you to run for 200 yards. I'm not asking you to go full Dylan Sampson. What I'm asking you to do is consistently run the ball for 4 yards a carry, because if that happens, and you get 2nd and 6. Well, there's only so many fundamental things that you can do against LSU. The teams that LSU has faced and that they have beaten. I look at the second half versus South Carolina. Chris, I think that they're the best front seven in the SEC. I don't think it's even up for debate. Well, what did you do? Oh, wait, it's 2nd and 6. Caden Durham ran for 90 yards in the second half. Well, why? Well, okay, they ran in the interior, and when they would come into the interior, he busted outside. Okay, that sounds exactly what you need to do. So I think you got to take the pressure off the run game, and take the pressure off the pass game by Chris, like, even if it's 2nd and 9, right? Like, even if it's a yard, yards win games, okay? Like, yards win and first downs win. I say all that because if you don't have number 2, number 3, it's going to be where it really shows up, and that's being Garrett. Chris, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if Pope John Paul II came down from heaven with manna in hand and said, Blake, turnovers are not the reason that you're losing football games. I would look at Pope John Paul II and say to him, you're an idiot. Okay? Like, you're an idiot because, Chris, you legitimately, if you look at A&M, I consider turnovers missed field goals, turnover on downs, and outright turnovers. Well, you had 2 missed field goals. You had a missed field goal in reference to a bad snap. You had 3 turnovers. You had a turnover on downs. That's 6 turnovers that Chris, I'm not saying A&M's a bad football team. I don't believe that at all. But what I'm saying is they needed to have that to beat you, right?
It's like baseball, Blake. You can't give a team extra outs. You just can't do it.
You make an error at short, what's going to happen?
A good team's going to capitalize. Yeah.
A good team's going to capitalize on that, and that's what A&M did. Everybody wants to look at Marcel Reed, and they should. But the bottom line, Chris, when you turn the ball over, you're going to lose. Fundamentals of the game don't change. And Garrett has got to be good this week more than any week. That if it's not there, run, get down, or take a sack. And here's the big reason here why, Chris, too. Cole Adams, the punt returner for Alabama, is out. He's out for the season. What if you have a muff punt? What if you, goofier shit has happened in Baton Rouge on a Saturday night, I promise you, than a muff punt. So you got to test that out early, too. Nick Saban, we were talking about him earlier, said something in the coaching clinic, Chris, that I live by. Every successful offensive possession ends in a kick, whether it be a punt, a field goal, or an extra point. And you cannot turn the ball over. Now, here's the thing that I think has happened here a little bit too, and why it's not overarching for LSU. Garrett makes these heroic throws in the fourth quarter against Ole Miss. So people don't look at the 2 interceptions he threw before that. Where are you as a team, Chris, LSU-wise? Where are you as a team if you're not turning the ball over? Do you blow out South Carolina? I mean, you had a block punt. You had 2 interceptions. 1 did get called back, but you had a turnover on downs at the goal line. So let's look at that. Then you look at Ole Miss. Well, you had a turnover on downs. You had 2 picks. Then you had 6, what I count as 6 turnovers against A&M, and then 2 against South Alabama. Here's the truth. I don't think LSU's as far off as people want to make them to be. If they can hold on to the football, simple principle, I think that they can be better. I know that it is a long-winded answer, but Chris, I look at this LSU team as saying that you're better than what you're doing. You can be so much better than who you are. That in and of itself is what frustrates me more than anything, is because when you're making dumb decisions, that's when I don't know who you are as a team, and then I can't fairly judge the defense. Last thing here, and I know, again, long-winded. You can't start off drives at the 8-yard line. You can't start off drives at the 21 or 19-yard line. You can't start off drives at the 37. You can't give up 21 points in 57 yards. I mean, like, it's abysmal. Like, it's abysmal. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but there just comes a part where I don't know who you are as a team because you're not eliminating those turnovers.
So, Blake, on that note, you've, again, watched the film. When you look at Alabama, areas of opportunity for LSU where you think the matchups are favorable, and on the flip side, the areas of concern. I mean, you mentioned Jalen Milroe and what we saw in that A&M game. Maybe you go there, but matchups on the other side that you feel like that LSU's, maybe deficient in or going to have to at least shore up to get this win.
Well, number one, the biggest strength is being at home, because Alabama's 129th in the country in penalties and penalty yardage.
And both their losses are on the road.
And both of their losses are on the road. So when I look at Alabama, I say to myself, okay, it would be an outlier. So this could happen. Alabama could come in there and play penalty-free football, Chris. I mean, it's not going to happen. Okay. Well, you said it, not me. But it would be an outright outlier for what's happened to them over the last 24 months.
Yeah, even going back to Saban. Yeah.
Even going back to Saban, you were 120th in the country in penalties. So they would have to shore that up. So what do I mean? The biggest advantage is third down and this place going ballistic, right? That's why I would pick LSU in a game like this because, look, I've just seen it too much. So that number one. When I look at Alabama defensively, they're not changing things schematically. And I think that the worst thing that you can do, if LSU is who they need to be, you better not run man coverage all night. You cannot do it. And if Garrett hits some of these other receivers not named Kyron Lacy, like I look at Aaron Anderson. Aaron Anderson is the least talked about wide receiver in the SEC, and he should be one of the most talked about because he has less targets or half the targets of Kyron Lacy and has 4 less yards than him. So I think that you, based off of what you do and the scheme that you run and the air raid principles that you have, if LSU is getting the ball out quick in man-to-man coverage, Chris, it's going to be a great night. It's going to be a great night because I like Kane Womack. I see what he's trying to build here. At the same time, Chris, if you're going to keep running the same stuff over and over and over and over again, I don't care if you like Joe Sloan, hate Joe Sloan, love him. I don't care. Brian Kelly's going to be the one that starts piecing you apart. And so that's what I think the advantage is. Yes, please run man coverage. Please. Chris, when we were kids, I would tell, I'm not going to say that because they make me look like a dummy. I double dog dare you to run man-to-man coverage like you've been doing. Tennessee in the second half, Nico had success. Why? Because he was of course, he threw like 6 slants. 6. Because they kept running man-to-man coverage. And I'm like, dude, that's all they're doing. They're running a fade route and a slant, fade route, slant, fade route, slant. And I'm like, at some point, take it away. And that's the part where if you let Kyron Lacy, C.J. Daniels, Chris Hilton, Aaron Anderson, if you give them that space, they're going to eat you alive. I promise you it's going to happen. Now, you better be able to stop number 4 in the red zone. So I'm going to tell you. Because, dog, I don't care what anybody says about Milroe. I watched more film in the last 2 weeks on Alabama than I've done any team this year so far. Brother, when they get in the red zone and number 4 gets out there, dog, he is a dude, bro. Like, he's a dude, man. And I put him in the top 5 Heisman race, dude, from what I've seen. I know he's got the losses, but, gee, my God. This dude in the red zone, Chris, he is outrunning people. He's running people over. He's getting in right protections. And this is the thing about Milroe, too. If they can protect him in the pocket, I think that it's going to be a long night for LSU. So some positives, but, man, Milroe is the key to this victory for Alabama, man. And I think that if they get in the red zone, if they get inside the 20, Chris, a lot, LSU's in deep, deep doo-doo.
Blake, correct me if I'm wrong. The least amount of passing attempts for Garrett Nussmeier in a game this season, 34. Is that right?
Yeah, and they didn't throw in the fourth quarter. So
yeah, could I argue, Blake, because you mentioned the running game, and I agree with you, LSU needs to go out there and punch somebody in the mouth and establish a running game. Could I argue that one of the keys for LSU is, will Garrett Nussmeier throw it less than 34 times? If he's throwing it less than 30 times, it probably bodes well because they're probably running the football pretty well. Because the more, it's like the more passing attempts Garrett Nussmeier has, all due respect, I like him a lot, but it's like the more passing attempts he has, the more you're putting yourself at risk. Like we're inviting more bad things to happen. All due respect, but
No, you're fundamentally right. I mean, Chris, if he throws for at or under 34 passing attempts, 2 things have to happen here. Number 1, he's got to get hurt. Okay, and he doesn't play in the whole fourth quarter. Or number 2, 3 things. Or number 2, LSU is just getting the ball out so quickly in the first half, like they're just dicing it up and they're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 yards that those start adding up, right? Like they're extensions of run games. So
that's how you're like 17 for 22 at halftime.
Right. Yeah. 1,000%. It's like, look, man, I think of like a baseball team like Kentucky. Why is Kentucky so good? Well, they lead the country in singles. If you hit enough singles, you're going to be pretty damn good. I don't see a world where that happens, Chris. I legitimately don't, because I think that they're going to run it a little bit more, right? But I also think that they're not going to get away from their identity. I think they'll run it more than 24 times, but instead of 50, he's throwing it 40 times, right? So It's not. I don't see a world where that happens, really, because they're going to have to prove it to me. But to your core point of what you're asking, Garrett Nussmeier is better when you're taking the ball out of his hands. I mean, as every quarterback. Like, you're never going to rip on Garrett Nussmeier for handing the football off. It's never going to happen. But he's got, and to the point here, he's got to have a more effective running game. This isn't all on him. And I don't want to keep, like, because people say, you're putting it all on Garrett. No, I'm putting the bad decisions on him. Chris, if he takes a sack besides throwing it up to a 5'7" receiver, it's a good play. They beat you on a play. Who gives a shit? So
can't throw it back across the middle of the field. You know,
so a 5'7"
across your body. Right.
If the receiver was 6'7", I'd be like, yeah,
give the guy a chance.
Like, you're giving a guy a chance. I mean, like, your 6'7" guy's got to go up the ladder and at least knock it down.
I mean, don't you feel like, Blake? I mean, I would say that the message from Brian Kelly to Nuss, you don't want to like change who he is, but the message is, hey man, if you don't turn it over, we're going to win. I mean,
well, look, that's what Brian Kelly said all week. And look, I didn't mention this when you talked about the things that LSU's been working on the bye week. He made it very clear this week that we've been telling him, you cannot turn the ball over. Chris, he's got to dial it down. He is
you Brett Favre, baby.
Well, I'm going to keep saying it about when we call him Brett Favre. There's a reason Brett Favre in 20-plus seasons only has one Super Bowl, because you cannot turn the ball over. But Chris, if he tones some of the shots down, meaning taking shots down, if he tones that down and starts fundamentally doing things correct, I got to be real with you. I think he could be borderline elite. I mean, because you can't look at some of the throws that he makes and say to yourself, like, bro, there's dudes in the NFL that can't make that throw. We watch it every Sunday. I mean, like, so the Saints don't, speaking of like Louisiana, the Saints don't have a guy right now that can make a throw that he made to Aaron Anderson against Ole Miss. It's not existent. I mean, Derek Carr's ass. So, but here's the thing that both of them have in common. They make poor decisions. And we praise the quarterback so much that we don't want to overemphasize the bad decisions. Chris, he will be borderline elite. And I hate look, if you watch AYS Ruffino Joe show, you know that I hate that verbiage. But some of the stuff that he does, Chris, you can't buy. Like, there's teams in the NFL that can't buy some of the throws that he makes. However, you got to take some of the good with the bad. Like the second interception against A&M. They beat you from a schematical play calling aspect. I don't mind that. Okay. It's the 7 turnovers in a month that bothers me, right? That's the part that starts bothering me here. So I know that's a long-winded answer again, but you got to emphasize, and Brian Kelly emphasized this week, and beat down, we cannot turn the ball over. And it's the reverse Jaden Daniels. Everybody's like, Jaden Daniels doesn't throw the ball down the field. Well, yeah, he does. It's just that you led the country, or you led the SEC in drops, and so he doesn't want to throw it. Chris, here's going to be a big thing in this game for Garrett Nussmeier. If he runs for 3 first downs, regardless of down or distance, LSU wins. Because when guys play man coverage on the outside and you run go routes, you got to at some point turn your back. And when you have a running back that goes out in the flat or goes out in the coverage, you have 5 or 6 guys on 4, meaning 4 pass rushers, and then you have 5 offensive linemen and a quarterback. You got to be able to run the football. The best play that Garrett Nussmeier has made all year, it was against Ole Miss when that exact thing happened, and he stepped up in the pocket and ran it for first down. That was a game-time drive. If he does that 3 times, Chris, we're going to be popping fireball off in this thing, cinnamon galore up in this thing, and Dewey encrusted up in this thing. So that if he does that and they beat it into his head to do it, I think that they're going to win this football game.
Blake, finally, before we get you out of here, at risk of sounding like a broken record, because I've had you on multiple times previously this season, and it feels like every time we come to the topic of Brian Kelly, biggest game of the Brian Kelly era. It's what does this mean for this is a must win for Kelly. This is, we talked during Ole Miss. It was a program defining game. I mean, Blake, does it not kind of feel like here we are yet again? I mean, it's year 3 with the college football playoff on the line, and taking none of these opponents lightly, by the way. But after this game, you're at Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. Vandy and Oklahoma, obviously, in Tiger Stadium at Death Valley. So, I mean, Blake, It's kind of like you say a lot when I talk to you. If they were to lose, you know what the Sunday headline's going to be. So it's like it's as must win. I mean, it feels like this is the biggest game of the Brian Kelly era to date. I mean, is that unfair? I mean,
oh no, 1,000% is. I think Ole Miss was program defining in the sense of that they went out in the portal and spent all the money when you didn't, and you still beat them, right? You got your revenge on them. Now you go to a place against Alabama, Chris. If they went out, you do know that they're in the SEC. They're in Atlanta,
yeah,
because they'd have the tiebreaker over Georgia. A&M and Texas are going to cancel themselves out. I mean, man, yeah, I can't think of a bigger one. The only thing, and it was against Bama, the only thing that I would say would be 2022 was pretty big for Brian Kelly because, look, we'll give you a couple of losses because you're revamping a program, but you went out there and at least if you were competitive, okay, we know the program's in the right direction. But, Chris, this is what people don't understand about LSU, and SEC fans can label it however they want. Nick won a title in year 3. Ed won a title in year 3. Les won a title in year 3. Brian Kelly's the only one that hadn't. He's in year 3. Expectations for programs change based off of what you've done and where you've been. So, for example, we went to a baseball scrimmage this past week, or when you came down a month ago. Chris, you had people in there pre-gaming. Like, again, I can't. If you logically think about the situation, this place is won 5 national titles in 5 years. Not all in the same sport. The only one they don't have one in is football, or they have one in football and 19 with Burrow. But they got one in baseball. They have one in women's basketball. They have one in gymnastics. They have one in football. The bottom line becomes is the expectation now for this place is so ramped up. Chris, you can't look I'm not going to say who I was talking to, but you can't talk to Jay Johnson and not look on his face and know the expectation. Same with Kim Mulkey. The same with Matt McMahon. You can't do that. So can't look at Brian Kelly. He knows. I mean, he's got to know. I mean, he's not a dummy. So, yes, it's the biggest game in the Brian Kelly era and tenure. And I think that when you look at this game, Chris, if he wins, DJ Lagway hurt. You're going to go in Florida and get beat by Yale. Chris, if they get beat by Yale quarterback, I'm going to lose my shit. I'm going to lose my shit. But you see the dynamic. Are you 1,000% sure that Vandy can come into Tiger Stadium at night and win? Oklahoma. So this comes down to the fact of, I'm not saying that you're in a one-game season here, Chris. You're kind of in a one-game season, right? Like, I mean, you might not have good performances against Florida, which Florida kind of scares me, even though DJ Lagway's out. But, I mean, Vandy, I mean, it is what it is, man. We talked about this when I came on today, A&M week with you. You're through the hardest part of your schedule, without a doubt. It's not remotely close because I think you're going to smoke Oklahoma. I shouldn't say smoke. I think you're going to beat Oklahoma. You're going to beat Vandy. You're going to beat Florida. And you can't, Chris, they don't want to go to a Cheez-It Bowl. That's what it comes down. I love Cheez-Its. It's the Jesus cracker of the South, okay? You cannot go to a Cheez-It Bowl again. It just can't happen.
We can't see Brian Kelly get doused in Cheez-Its, man. It just can't happen.
Not again. And God, I swear to God, I'll break a TV if he gets doused in Duke's mayo. Like, I can't. I know. But the only one that I would be a little bit acceptive of, you ready? The Pop-Tart Bowl. I love Pop-Tarts. That'd be the only one. You better go to the Pop-Tart Bowl if you lose out. But, Chris, again, to the point of where all right. Now, I'm going to give you a little something here, too, that this is going to come out if it happens. Do you know who hired Jimbo Fisher at A&M?
I do not.
His name's Scott Woodward. He was the AD at Texas A&M. Do you know where Scott Woodward's the AD at now?
Fill me in.
LSU. So then you have an AD who you look at. I know that he got Jay. I know that he got Kim. I know he got all these people. Hey, man, the last 2 coaches that you hired in football has been Jimbo and Brian Kelly. Mm-hmm. Shit's gonna get real, brother. Shit, I'm looking at you right now. I'm because this is my line of sight. Saying, all right, all right. That man ain't gonna be able to go to Pirates for a month. Okay, you hear me? All right, that's where they're at, and that's where they're at. And so, look, man, this place will give you everything that you need. There's nothing that you can't. Chris, the fans are. You can't, bro. They're gonna be loud for you. They're gonna give you the atmosphere. Now you got to go respond and replicate it, because if you don't, man, Brian Kelly's got to make a playoff. Let's call it what it is. He's got to make a playoff.
That's fair. The expectations are what they are. Everybody knows that. We all do. Blake Ruffino, AYS Sports, Ruffino and Joe Show. Always a pleasure. It is going to be a rowdy one, and that is putting it lightly, Saturday night at Tiger Stadium at Death Valley. And Blake, I'll tell you this, my friend. I know you were trying to convince me for weeks. We will be in Oxford, Mississippi this weekend.
Why am I even on this show? Bye.
I know. Listen,
you broke my heart.
If there's 1 week this season that I wish I could be in 2 places at once, it is this week. Part of my spirit will be in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I promise. So I'll make it up to you at some point. We'll make it up to you.
And you know what's even worse is if they win and you get to miss a Bama storming.
I know.
Dude, if I'm Nick Saban and LSU's about to win a close game, he better get out of there. Fans are going to do something like Saban better watch out. He's too little. He's too little. He can't fight.
He'll get lost in the madness.
Oh, Chris, they'll find him.
Yeah.
They'll find him. Dude. I was going to show you a piece of the goalpost from 22. It's not in here. I have a piece of the goalpost. The fans shipped it to me. When they won in 22, so it's not in here. My wife, she fucking cleans too much. Anyway,
Blake, you're the man. I appreciate you taking the time, man. Let folks know where they can check out your work, by the way, in case they
AYS Sports. We're going to continue. We have some time changes here, Chris, this week, so be on the lookout for that. We've been having to go at 5 because of basketball starting, and LSU starts basketball this week. So Ruffino and Joe Show 2, AYS Sports is where you can find us. A lot of stuff, Chris. It's. We say this every week. People are like, oh, this is going to be a massive week. Every week in the SEC is a massive week if you keep watching. By the way, if DJ Lagway plays, Texas is in trouble. That's how I'm going to leave you.
Blake, you're the man. We'll do it again soon.